We have Nun Aleph Amud Bet right at the bottom of the page. We already got to the top of Nun Bet Amud Aleph. And actually, we got to the bottom of Nun Bet Amud Aleph, I should say. We're going to go to Nun Bet Amud Bet today. We're in the middle of a section of the Gemara where we're focusing on the Yetzer Hara. And it's just interesting that the segue into it was Davka Simcha. I mentioned to you previously that that's one of the memorot of Rabbi Akiva. Everybody knows many people think Rabbi Akiva wrote, but of course it's actually a pasuk in the Torah in Parshat Kedoshim. But he did have other sayings, and among them that there's a connection between frivolity and licentious behavior. So the guardrails come off and the like. And Davka Chazal choose to situate much of the discussion about the Yetzer Hara in Masechet Sukka, in the section about Simcha Pei Shueva, to remind us to be on guard. And of course, because of the associative principle of Gemara, traditionally, so too here, they're going to go into more limudim about the Yetzer Hara, and it'll give us a window into it and to recognize there are different chachamim who had different ideas about how to understand the Yetzer Hara. If they always say exactly the same thing, we don't need everyone to say it, right? The point is different elements. And recall that at the top of Nun Bet Amud Aleph was a discussion, which really was a segue into it, about the day of eulogizing for something or someone. Two possibilities. It was Rabbi Dos and the Chachamim. One possibility, Mashiach ben Yosef. The other one, that it's actually for the Yetzer Hara. And even so, the men and the women are separated. And then the Gemara was asking, well, Mashiach ben Yosef, that makes sense that people would be crying in their sadness. What's the reason for crying at the death of the Yetzer Hara, the destruction of the Yetzer Hara? Kadosh Baruch Hu is kiviyachol shechting the Yetzer Hara. Everyone should be happy. So the Rishayim are crying because they realized that the whole thing was actually much easier than they realized, and they could have overcome the Yetzer Hara, but they lived for the moment and not with a long perspective and a notion that they would be standing din v'cheshbon. So it was kechuta se'ara. They realized they could have overcome it. It was like a hair's breadth. That's how easy it would have been. But the tzaddikim, conversely, are crying with tears of relief that really the Yetzer Hara was a massive mountain, and somehow they were able to overcome the Yetzer Hara that dogged them like it does every other human being. So they're each crying for their own reasons. From there, the Gemara went into the further discussion. They said, we'll close the loop about Mashiach ben Yosef. What about Mashiach ben David? Mashiach ben David's asking for life. They see Mashiach ben Yosef was killed. And then the 7 names of the Yetzer Hara, each one another aspect of the Yetzer Hara, and the fact that the various psukim throughout Tanakh are marshaled in order to make this point is to say that the Yetzer Hara is wily, the Yetzer Hara shifts, and comes to us in various guises. So you have some of the Rishonim and Achronim are trying to parse why the need for different types of language about the Yetzer Hara. Just say it's the Yetzer Hara. Like, you have to know that it's called Ra, and then it's called the Orel, and then it's right. But that's the point, is that the Yetzer Hara is a complex aspect of the human condition, and therefore it takes on various forms and in various contexts. It's interesting, by the by, of course, the many Sfarim written about the Yetzer Hara. Take one example, that's what the Tanya is very much about grappling with the Yetzer Hara and the kochot that were within the human composition that need either redress or to be channeled or to be held in, whatever it is. But this is part of the human condition. The book Tanya, written based on, the jumping off point is, of course, the Gemara and Masechet Nida about the person, the neshama rather, learning all of the Torah in Shamayim and then being born into the world. And when the child gets that, call it the fraskin punim, that they forget everything, they're told to hit tzaddik v'al tehi rasha. So the aspiration should be to be a tzaddik and not be rasha, but of course that doesn't remove free will. To the bottom of Nun Bet Amud Aleph, that was the discussion about all these different psukim. The first of the 7 psukim, 7 names for the Yetzer Hara, if you look 2, 4, 6, 8 lines up in the narrow lines on the page, or 9 lines up. Dosh Rabbi Avi Rabbi Itim Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi Shiv'a Shemot Yesh Lo Yetzer Hara, and then it gives you the names. Because Baruch Hu Karo Ra, Moshe Karo Arel, right? David Karo Tameh, Shlomo Karo Soneh. So it's not just the context, but different. Whoever's doing the naming will give it another term. They encounter the Yetzer Hara in a little bit of a different way. The source of it all is HaKadosh Baruch Hu refers to the Yetzer Hara as Ra. That's why it gets its name, the evil inclination, right? So that pasuk that's marshaled from pasuk there, Ki Yetzer Lev Adam Ra Minu Urav, will remind us that that pasuk is from Parashat Noach, after the flood. As Hashem recognizes, as Noach is offering the korbanot following on the end of the Mabul, Hashem declares that the recognition that Ki Yetzer Lev Ha'adam Ra Minu Urav, and therefore there will not be a continued possibility of curse against the earth. Lo sif od lekalel et lekalel od et ha'adama ba'avur ha'adam ki Yetzer Lev Ha'adam Ra Minu Urav. And that leads into the 7. I bring that one up specifically because the last thing that we saw was a story about Abaye, who had this suspicion about someone and realized that it was really about him and his own self-doubt about his own capability to control his Yetzer, and he felt bad that he saw that another person actually was able to, and he was consoled by being told by Ataha Husaba, a mysterious old man said to him, a wise man said to him, sometimes referred to as Eliyahu Hanavi, came and told him, Kol HaGadol Mechaver Yitzro Gadol Heimenu. And it was greater than their friend. They have a greater Yetzer that they have to contend with. Vide, earlier on, we saw that Tzaddikim view the Yetzer Hara as a great mountain, right? As a Har. And they somehow overcome the Yetzer Hara. And that's a great thing that Tzaddikim are capable of. Har Gavoa. So that's the Gemara that we're up to now, the bottom of Nun Bet Amud Aleph, that follows on the heels of these Gemarot. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, Yetzer shel Adam mitgaber alav b'chol yom. The Yetzer of a person actually overcomes them every single day and is more powerful than they are. Shenamar, as the Torah declares, Rak Ra Kol Hayom. Now, what's Rak Ra Kol Hayom? All right, so that is a pasuk also related to the story of Noach. This one not from Parashat Noach, but from the parasha before it, from Parashat Bereshit. When HaKadosh Baruch Hu decides he's going to destroy the world. Rak Ra Kol Hayom. What's fascinating, and a good subject for a shir or a drasha on the Parshiot, what was the reason why the Mabul was going to happen became, after the Mabul, the reason why there won't be another Mabul. Just consider how it went down, right? Rak Ra Kol Hayom, and there's only wickedness, but there's HaKadosh Baruch Hu teaches humanity that there's this recognition after the Mabul that Ki Yetzer Lev Ha'adam Ra Minu Urav. It's not a sentence, it's not fate, but it's a condition, part of the human condition, and that recognition propels us forward. But Rak Kol Hayom, Rashi says, Kol Hayom Ra'ato Metusafat. There's an additional element each and every day, and that's the next statement on following on that. Amar Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish, Yitzro shel Adam mitgaber alav b'chol yom uvakesh lahamito. Each and every day, the person's Yetzer does overpower them and tries to have them killed every day. Shneimar, Sofeh Rasha Latzadik uvakesh lahamito. The wicked one views the righteous one and wants to kill him. If not for Hashem helping the individual, in other words, requiring siyata d'shmaya, there would be a disaster. Now, HaKadosh Baruch Hu helps an individual to overcome or to grapple with the Yetzer Hara. Shenemar, Hashem lo ya'azvenu v'yado v'lo yarshienu b'hishafto. All right, so that whole pasuk is actually the next pasuk that follows on the heels of the one that starts Sofer Rasha Latzadik. There's 2 psukim. One, the great power of the Yetzer Hara, that the Rasha looks for the tzaddik and wants to put him to death, but Hashem helps the individual. Now, does that refer to Hashem helping the individual in the manner of hashgacha pratit? Choliot. Alternatively, the idea that a human being has within them the capacity that HaKadosh Baruch Hu implanted within them to grapple with the Yetzer Hara, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu helps the individual each and every day by making sure the Yetzer Hara has a counterweight, which is the Yetzer HaTov. Now, why do I say that? I'm putting a little caveat, because at all times, the Rebbeim that I learned from, and they got their marching orders, if you will, from the Rambam, we have to maintain Bechira Chavshit at all times. The whole basis, the possibility of tshuva, of scharva onus, is predicated on there being free will. Yeah, there are other voices. You should be aware. The Kohen from Lublin, the Ishbitzer, in one place, maybe in his early life, the Sfas Emes seemed to indicate that even though we have a memory of Chazal, Hakol b'dei Shamayim chutz miyirat Shamayim, it may be that is a much more limited prospect than we imagine, and maybe some or many aspects of behavior are themselves somehow also governed by Hashem. That creates issues in terms of Scharva Onesh and Bechira. They have their way of working it out. Again, my Masorah is much more allied with the way of the Rambam, Hilchot Tshuva, and the Chachamim upon whom he based himself. I didn't make it up, but I'm saying interpretation. So when you see Vil Malach Kosh Baruch Hu Zerlo and a Yacholo, means we need Siyata D'Shmaya, but we still retain, as we say, ourselves, the idea of Bechira Chavshit means there could be not just Onesh, but it could be Schar. That's one of the functions of being a Yetzer Hara. The possibility of evil exists. If it doesn't exist, there can't really be reward. Yeah. So that's one of the arguments and discussions back and forth also about what's going to happen in Yemot HaMashiach. In Yemot HaMashiach, will there be a Yetzer Hara, or will that actually be destroyed with the onset of Yemot HaMashiach? Or is that like a later phase? Discussion. Ramban. Okay. Tana Devei Rabbi Yishmael. Im paga b'cham anuval zeh, mashchei lebeit hamidrash. Great piece of advice. If that disgusting one encounters you, you meet him, so drag him into the Beit Midrash. The main antidote for the Yetzer Hara is to go into the Beit Midrash, meaning to surround yourself in a context of limud, of kedusha, of actual learning Torah. So you're filling your mind with content that is mekadesh and matayr the individual, but also presumably also diverts an individual from whatever path they were on. Note that it's not paga b'cham anuval zeh mashchehu l'chumash. It's mashchehu l'beis hamedrash. The idea about going to the space specifically to change one's physical or geographic location, physical location. That's going to have an impact. And note that he calls it menuvel zeh, so certain antipathy, even though it's part of the human condition. We saw already 7 names. Rav Avira is darshaning. So Rabbi in the Academy of Rabbi Shmuel, they call it the menuvel. Rashi Yetzer Hara is the menuvel zeh. Moshchei lebeis medrash. Im evanhu nimoach. Im barzahu mitpotzeitz. If it's a stone, it'll melt. If it's iron, it will shatter essentially. Im evanhu nimoach dichtiv hoi kol tzamei l'chulamayim. Says the Sefer Yeshaya, all who are thirsty, let them go to the water. Uchtiv, it also says, right, another pasuk, this one from Eov, avanim shachaku mayim. Right, the stones are going to be made smooth by the water. Many of us know the Medrash from Avat Rabbi Natan, Rabbi Kiva, and he goes to watch the water on the stone, and the net result is it bores a hole, and he realizes if that could happen to a stone, it could happen to my heart of stone as well. I'm paraphrasing, but that's what happens. That's what convinces him. What's fascinating, by the way, it wasn't seeing a great Rebbe. Yeah, the Gemara says in one place Rabbi Kiva had a great antipathy for all things rabbinic. And derisive language about Chachamim, etc. He was a Jew, but he was an Amaretz, and somewhat had some animosity that he harbored for whatever reason. But then this story with the stone, like it made an impact. So same idea. Avanim shachakumayim. So if the Yetzer Hara is hard like a stone, it'll be melted. How? Through the water, which is Torah. L'chulamayim. Rashi, top line. Here you have a Dvar Torah ready for Shavuot. Nimshla Torah l'mayim. Uchtiv avanim shachakumayim. Yeah, so it'll wear it away, it'll erode it, smooth it out. In barzelhu mit potzeitz. If it's iron, it will explode. Dichtiv halo kodri keish neum Hashem uchepatish yefotzeitz sela. A little bit more challenging to understand what these words mean. I mean, not the words themselves. The Sefer Yirmiyahu describes, behold, my word is like fire, and like a hammer that will smash a stone. Yeah. So here the comparison is to fire, right? So Rashi here, a second line, dvari ka'esh, right? My word is like fire. Va'esh mifapea et habarzel. V'hainu mitpotzetz nitzotz nitzin mimenu. The fire will cause the iron to have sparks flying out of it, and to be eroded in some way, and that's going to be its end. So whether your Yetzer Hara is the Yetzer Hara of Mayim, or your Yetzer Hara is a Yetzer Hara of Eish, but no, if your Yetzer Hara is strong like Evan, you should know that what's stronger in the great rock, paper, scissors discussion for Klal Yisrael, it's water destroys the rock. What's the water? That's the Mayim of Torah. Yeah. Okay. And conversely, the fire, right? Could be a fire of passion, something negative. Yeah. The Mayim associated with Chesed, with something that's calm, serene, maybe life-giving. Yeah. Fire is something that has to do with passion. Could be anger. Could be lust. Could be something that's very negative. But no, your Yetzer Hara is not that. The Yetzer Hara is really a barzel. It's iron. It's solid. Both things, Evan and barzel, very hard substances, impenetrable. And what's a human being to do in their presence? Well, there's something called fire, and the fire of Torah can melt and cause the sparks to fly out of that piece of iron. Follow? In other words, it's not just that what you're looking at in this section is the Mayim and the Eish are Torah. I'm telling you that in other contexts, Mayim and Eish could also have an analogous element that are related lo aleinu to the Yetzer Hara. But here, Chazal are situating the Yetzer Hara on the solid objects, and these forces within nature that are found within nature are themselves able to get rid of the Yetzer Hara. What are those forces? What's that force in nature? It's called Torah. That's what it is. It's a mashal. It's a mashal. It's a mashal. Amar Shmuel bar Nachmani, Amar Rabbi Yonatan, Yetzer Hara mesito la'adam ba'olam hazeh umeid alav lo'olam haba. The Yetzer Hara will seduce a person in this world, cause them to lose themselves, and then it'll testify against them in Olam Haba. Shneimar, as the pasuk says, and we'll read the pasuk in a minute. But there's a Maharsha in Kiddushin. I saw one of the digests that I like to look at. That quoted the Maharsha points out that there's a Gemara in Bava Batra that says that the Yetzer Hara is the Satan, is the Malach HaMavet. They're all the same thing. Reish Lakish. It's Reish Lakish is Memra. So Reish Lakish says they're all the same thing. So whenever you see the one, you could have substituted for the other. So there's again, Maharsha Kiddushin points out that's what's going on here. First, the Yetzer Hara comes, tries to seduce the person in this world. Then the Yetzer Hara, so to speak, testifies in Shemayim as the Satan and says the person doesn't deserve to be alive. Then the judgment comes out, and then the Satan comes back down as the Malach HaMavet and takes the person away. It's the Yetzer Hara. It's all the same thing, but it's three different phases, if you will. It's a beautiful idea. And here's the pasuk is a person who is going to spoil themselves. Mifanek minor avdo va'acharito yiyeh manon. A person who will spoil from their servant from its youth. In the end will be a manon. What does manon mean? Right? So explains the Gemara. Shekain be'atbach sherabichia korin l'sahada manon. What is atbach? It's one of the many numerological substitution systems, the codes that Chazal have. You've heard of atbash, maybe something like this. This is one called atbach. What's atbach? Aleph and tet are substituted. Bet and chet are substituted, and so on and so forth. It leaves still a few letters that are without pairs, but the essential idea is if you were to make the transposition, the word manon would translate to sahada. What's sahada? Testimony in Aramaic. Yeah, anan sahade was where the witnesses. So korin l'sahada manon. Again, it's a play on the letters and the words and the like, but the idea is supposed to be that that ultimately there's consequences in this world, and those consequences are related to consequences in the next world as well. So meisito b'olam hazeh and me'id alav l'olam haba. It follows a person in their account heavenward. So if you look in Rashi, I still want to spend the time on it. He goes through all the different permutations, this one and that, and a few of the letters don't have a zug. What are they going to do? It's one of the transmission systems. I don't really understand where they're from. I assume they have a very early provenance, but like, I don't understand why that. Why not something else? Maybe it's Messina. I learned down, but it's a drasha. Beautiful idea. So Rav Huna Ramiktiv Kiruach Zenunim Hit'a. We refer to the Ruach Zenunim, which is the spirit of infidelity, something along those lines, right? And the spirit that falls Kiruach Zenunim Hit'a Uchtiv Bikirbam Betchila. Uchtiv Bikirbam. Yeah. All right. And then the pasuk further along, right, starts Hosea. It's two psukim also. They're not really next to each other, but whatever it is. Vayiznu mitacha, where are we? Kiruach Znunim Hit'a. And then further along, it mentions that it's Bikirbam. Kiruach Znunim Bikirbam. So which is it? Is the Ruach Znunim something that causes someone to go off the rails from an external perspective? Or is the Ruach Znunim the spirit of infidelity that courses within a person? Bitchila Hit'am. At the beginning, it throws a person off course. Ulavasof Bikirbam. Then it becomes something that is internal. So that's a little esoteric. Rava gives us beautiful allegory to understand it. Amar Rava. Bitchila karo helach. Ulavasof karo oreach. Ulavasof karo ish. At the beginning, the Yetzer Hara is referred to as someone you meet in the street. They're external to you. You have no relationship with them. They smile at you. You wave back. That's it. But the next phase is they're a guest in your house. And when they're a guest in your house, so then you care what they have to say. Rashi says this. You care what they have to say, and you're listening to them. And the achsanoi, but eventually the guest becomes the ish, becomes the master of the house, becomes the Baal Habayit, and starts dictating terms. So the Halech, Rashi says, over derech halav. Imo. He's not being hosted by him, but the Oreach already is your guest. You feel responsible towards them, and you're listening to what they have to say. You're interested in them, and then the Ish is the Baal Habayit. What's the source? Shenamar, and this source is from chapter 12 in Sefer Shmuel Bet, which follows on the heels of chapter 11. Obviously, but I use the term chapter 11 advisedly because if you want to know where the story of David and Bathsheba takes place, it's in chapter 11, Shmuel Bet, chapter 11. A parak, unfortunately, of moral bankruptcy. So in chapter 12, Natan Navi arrives and tells David HaMelech that he's done wrong, but he gives him an allegory as well. What's the allegory? It's known as the allegory of Kivsat Harash. The story of a wealthy man who has a guest. Vayovo helech leish ha'ashir vayachmol akachat mitzono umibokro. So this passerby comes to a wealthy man. The wealthy man has pity, so to speak, on his own sheep and his livestock, cattle, etc. He doesn't want to make that for the lasot la'oreach. Instead, what does he do? Chtiv vayikachet kivsat haish harash. He took the one lamb that belonged to the poor man next door, and he made that lamb for the man who had come upon him to live in his house. So from here, right? He didn't want to make for the oreach, from his own cattle and livestock. Instead, what did he do? He made the lamb from Yenim, from the other person who is next door, and i.e. from the poor neighbor, and therefore the guest went from being the Halech to the Orech, and now he's known as an Ish. He's the boss. Someone wrote in the chat, but I almost missed it. Once it becomes permanent, is tshuva possible? Yes, absolutely. Thanks for pointing that out in chat. Absolutely. The point is that the Yetzer Hara is absolutely not irrevocable, right? There's even debate about Acher, even though some people maintain that everyone's invited to return in Chutz Me'acher. There's that bat kol. There's a big discussion. Rav Soloveitchik has a beautiful, if incredibly gripping and sad essay about Acher, where he says if you look at basically in other Gemaras and Yerushalmi, etc., is there really such a bat kol, or does Acher claim there's such a bat kol? Because the Yetzer Hara is so much in his grip that he's convinced himself there's no road back. But of course, there's always a road back. And I'll just remind you, the one who wrote it in, when you look on 52a, we said at the beginning of the Yetzer Hara is a spider web, is a cobweb, then it becomes a cord, and eventually it becomes the intertwining of all of the cords to make a massive rope that is used to pull a wagon. Remember, if you ever seen a massive cord that's used to pull a wagon, right? You know, it's not like a string from a kite. It's fibers and fibers and fibers twisted to make larger fibers, which are themselves intertwined. It's very hard, but it's not impossible. And the point here is, you know, the closer and closer Yetzer Hara gets, the more and more the individual is in its grip. That's what happened with David HaMelech. That's exactly what happened with David HaMelech. And unfortunately, there was a downfall. By the by, no one should misunderstand Khalila what I said. You know, that David HaMelech morally filed for chapter 11 and chapter 11. The numbers, first of all, of the chapters are bunk. They don't mean anything to us, those numbers. They were foisted upon us in the Middle Ages by people who do not like us and wanted to enforce us to debate them on their terms. So they gave us chapters and numbers that means nothing. That's one. And two, of course, David Malka Mashiach is the greatest Baal Tshuva, right? He's the one being described here by the Navi, Natan Hanavi tells him, this is how terrible it's become. He's an Ish in your house. And then what does David say? Chatati LaHashem. Right away, he acknowledges, right? And there's a tshuva process. By the by, unfortunately, not a tshuva process without consequences. Meaning, Natan Hanavi tells him, you're going to suffer 4 times over. And that is what happens. Very, very terribly. Which is children, there's a lot of suffering that he endures. But there is a road back, and he takes the road back. And it is possible, and David HaMelech therefore becomes the paragon of Baal Tshuva throughout the ages to remind us, no, even if you're far away, Leiv Tahor, Barali Elokim, Baruch Nachon Chadesh B'Kirbi, that's the tefillah of David HaMelech, where in the chapter that we read the other, just before when I was mentioning about that David HaMelech has a tefillah, where's it chapter 51 in Tehillim, which is what? When you open chapter 51 in Tehillim, what does it start off with? It basically says, this is when Natan Hanavi came to David, this is what he said. This is the tefillah that he wrote. What did he say? Hashem, please create for me a pure heart again, and renew the spirit within me. Chadesh ruach nachon, a proper spirit, renew within me. In other words, that becomes the paradigm. And that's why we're all talking about David HaMelech, especially during the time period of Tshuva, etc. So within that context, having said this, the last line of the narrow lines, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, it's in the context of what David HaMelech had done, right? It says, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Eiver katan yesh la'adam, mar ivo savea masbio ra'ev, shenemar kemar itam vayisbe'u. So Rabbi Yochanan, speaking euphemistic language, says that a man has a small organ, which if he starves it, he'll be full, but if he satiates it, he'll be hungrier, i.e. that the more one indulges in such behavior, so indulgent behavior, in the sexual realm, so one thing compounds on the other, it builds one after the other. And that's what he writes. Rashi writes it this way, Mas bio b'tashmis ra'ev, so gufa chaser koach v'rav le'etzik. Now I'm sorry, Rashi says it as the person will be weaker when they're older, but in another context, there are those who understand this as the person will become more and more obsessed. You could say more addicted in a way that is unhealthy. Quoting again a pasuk to shore it up. Amarav Acha bar Acha bar Rav Chana bar Acha Amri Bei Rav Arba Mitchadel Lena Kadosh Baruch Hu Shebra'am. 4 things that Hashem Kiviyachol regret that he made. Doesn't mean literally he regretted that he made it, because he made it and he knows everything in the future. The point is, as it were, these are things that, as a result of their existence in the world, which has a function and is necessary, there are a lot of negative consequences that came about. Ve'eluhen. Galut, Kastim, Vishmaelim, Yetzer Hara. Note of that list, 2 of them are peoples, one of which doesn't exist anymore, and one of which, okay. So these are the 4 things. Exile, the Chaldeans, the Ishmaelim, and the Yetzer Hara. Galut, Tichtiv. What's the pasuk about Galut? It's a pasuk from Yeshaya. Right? Va'ata mali fo ne'um Hashem. Ki lukach ami chinam. Moshlav, where am I here? Chinam v'chulei, and it goes on. It says that the those who rule over it, the Jewish nation, they're singing a Hala basically. They're Yehelilu. They're like praising whatever they're praising. Says Hashem, "V'tamid kol yom shmi minoatz." My name is being blasphemed all the time. That was with regard to the idea of exile altogether. Kasdim, the Chaldeans, the ones who destroyed the Beit HaMikdash. Kasdim. That's the Bavlim, or the Kasdim. Dichtiv, right? Also a pasuk from Yeshaya, from another parak. Hein Eretz Kasdim, Zeh Ha'am Lo Haya. Right? So it describes the Chaldeans also. The pasuk to shore it up. Yishma'elim Dichtiv, Yishlayu Oalim, Lishodadim, Uvetuchot, Lamargize El, Lasher, Hevi, Eloah Biyado. So here a pasuk from Sefer Eov. They're sitting in their tents in tranquility. They're brigands or thieves, and they're essentially with security, even as they anger Hashem, to the one who brought Hashem's Kiviyachol into his hand. So in other words, that's the Ishmaelim, because they were in those days nomads who had a lot of tents and grazing land in the middle of nowhere and deserts, etc. So it's assumed to be associated with them. Yetzer Hara dichtiv, and this pasuk from Sefer Micha, va'asher hareoti. The pasuk is B'yom ha'hu Hashem osfa hatzolea v'hanidacha akabetza va'asher hareoti. So Amar Rabbi Yochanan ilmale shalosh mikrot halalu nitmot tu ragleim shel soneihem. So the Gemara goes on to say, Rabbi Yochanan points out, if not for the following three psukim, the enemies of the Jewish people, that's euphemistic language, would have fallen out beneath them. They would have faltered as a result of it. Right? Shoneim Shel Yisrael. Right? Chad dichtiv v'asher hareoti. Right? It says v'asher hareoti, meaning that somehow HaKadosh Baruch Hu, as it were, has caused there to be a Yetzer Hara for the Jewish people. So if you look at Rashi here, it's and if you look on the narrow lines of the Gemara, last four lines of the Gemara, follow your eye to the left. Dibra mantchil v'asher hareoti. Reisha dikra osfa hatzolei avanidacha aka beitza. Right? I will gather together. It sounds like it's positive. I'll gather together the one who limps, and the one who is pushed away will I bring in. V'asher hareoti, and the one who I caused to be wicked. Ani barati Yetzer Hara hamachtiam v'garamti lehem kol zot. I caused the Jewish people to do the sins that they do. Right? So shalosh mikraot amidin shavonot v'hizkiru biyado v'tochen halavavot. Right? They avonot v'azchuyot. Excuse me. Biyado v'tochen halavavot. According to Rashi, these three psukim tell us that the sins and the merits are on a certain level in God's hands. Now, not literally that there's no bechira chofshit, but that the capacity for evil was given to us by Hashem. So it's not going to save us from judgment, but at least we could say the fact that it's out there, we were born that way.
What about non-Jews? Do they have a form of Yetzer Hara?
Yeah, but it's a human thing. It's a human thing.
He mostly talk about Jews here, right? Or not?
So it seems in this context, this pasuk, yes, you're right. But the notion of a Yetzer Hara, so non-Jews, of course, have a Yetzer Hara. Yeah, sure, absolutely, and then some. So for sure. Again, the capacity for goodness as well, but it's part of the human condition. So Shariyoti v'chad another pasuk. Hine kachomer b'yad hayotzer. Anybody recognize that pasuk? Why are we saying that? Labrit habeit, val tefen, la yetzer. Ki hine kachomer b'yad hayotzer is a very beautiful piyut, but it maximizes the idea that even the actions that we take, we're no more than the clay in the hands of the potter. So what do you want from us, Ribono Shel Olam? Now, we're at Yom Kippur because we say Chew Tefillah Tzedakah, Ma'afirin Ro'ag Zera, and we're still held to account. But on a certain level, and that's what Rabbi Yochanan's saying, if not for these three psukim, we wouldn't have any leg to stand on. But we have a little bit of a defense. What's the defense? We're like Chomer B'yad Hayotzer. That's a pasuk from Sefer Yirmiyahu. That's why Labrit Habeit looked at the covenant and don't look at the Yetzer. I'll remind you, it's already years ago and a pandemic ago, so who can even remember? But I did quote in the name of Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sachs Zatzal that he thinks that the Brit is not the Brit of Yud Gimel Midot Harachamim. He thinks the Brit is the Brit with Noach. Ki Yetzer Leiv Ha'adam Ra Minu Urav. Remember, Hashem, that you made a covenant with humanity, saying in the end, we have a proclivity that drives us sometimes away from you and to do things that are wrong. but still you're not going to curse the earth, are you? No, you said you won't. La brida beit val tefen la yetzer. What yetzer? Ki yetzer leiv adam raminur. Yeah. Okay. So hine kechom b'yad yotzer kain atem. We're going. V'idach, and a third one. Vasiroti et leifa even mi b'sarchem. V'natati lachem leiv basar. From Sefer Yechezkel, I will remove your heart of stone and I will give you one of flesh. Rav Papa Amar Achna Nami, another pasuk also from Yechezkel, V'ruchi etein b'kibbechem, from the nevuah of the dry bones that we just read on Pesach. V'ruchina etein b'kibbechem v'gomer. Right. So now another pasuk comes up. This one opening another memra. So it's like a semicolon here, another thing. And this is a pasuk from Zechariah. Var'eni Hashem arba'ach harashim. Hashem showed me 4 craftsmen, 4 artisans. Manat ninhu. How does article translate to harashim? It says craftsmen. Rasha kivanti. Okay, craftsmen, artisans, good. Man ninhu arba'ach harashim. Who are they? Amar Rav Chana bar Bizna. Amar Rabbi Shimon Chasida. Who are they? Mashiach ben David, Mashiach ben Yosef, V'Eliyahu v'Kohen Tzedek. Who's Kohen Tzedek? Rashi. Who's Shem ben Noach? V'nikra Charesh v'Yechazek Charesh et Soref. V'Breshit Rabbah Mefarish Leba Malki Tzedek is the Kohen Tzedek. Shabali Krat Avram Ubercho v'Chizko v'Karo Charesh al Shem Binyan Hateva Shebana im Aviv. He was the Charesh who built the Teva with his father. But why not his father? Why him? Because he's the Kohen Tzedek. He's Malki Tzedek. Fascinating, by the way, on the list of 4, one of these is not like the others. Shem ben Noach is part of a universal relationship with the Kodesh Baruch Hu. He is quite literally a ben Noach. Yeah. Kohen Tzedek is Shem ben Noach, Shem who helped his father build the Teva. So he's one of the artisans. Mashiach ben Yosef, Mashiach ben David, Mashiach ben Yosef, Eliyahu. Yeah, so that's the idea of what they're gonna do. Rashi tells us, I skipped it, but Rashi says Mashichim Shnehem Charashim Labinan Mikdash. Eliyahu is a Cheresh Even. Eliyahu is one who builds things out of stone. He's a stone cutter. Shebana Mizbeach Bahara Carmel. Umatzinu Shu Atud Lishtaleach, and he's going to come back. Lifnei Bo Yom Hashem Agadav Hanora. Yeah, I have 1 minute left. So the Kohen Tzedek. Mativ Rav Sheshet Yihachi Hainu Dichtiv. What about the fact that it says in the very pasuk before it, the next pasuk, excuse me, V'emer Elai Ela Kranot Asher Zaru et Yehuda, right? So wait a minute. The next pasuk that comes right after it makes it sound like Hashem's going to do in those 4 and going to get rid of them. Essentially, they're going to somehow be punished. Omar ma ela ba'im la'asod v'mer ela kranot asher zeru et Yehuda. These are the horns that gored Yehuda. Kifi ish lo nasar rosho ve'yavo ela achridotam li'adot et kranot hagoyim and osim karen et eretz Yehuda l'zarota. They're going to get their just desserts. So the charashim are bad. They're not good. Yeah. So the Gemara then says, no, hani l'shuva, that it means these are the ones who are going to come back. L'shuva oto. What are you referring to? If you look in the note here, it points out Yative Motve Yehuda. It's that these people are going to get their recompense for what they did wrong to Yehuda. Amar Le, so he answered him. Chana bar Bizna answered him. Shafil Sefer Dikra. Look at the end. These 4 charashim will come to strike fear in the hearts of the people who did ill to the Jewish people. L'achridotam liyadot et karnot hagoyim. Liyadot, excuse me, at karnot hagoyim. Hanosim karen al eretz Yehuda al zarota. They will avenge what's happened to Yehuda. The people who did wrong, who will do the avenging? The 4 charashim. So he answered him. He responded. Rav Sheshet responded. You know what? Amali bahari chana bagadata lamali. If that's how you talk, Chana, you're a master of agadata. I can't even hold a candle to what you say, so I'm just gonna not respond. You're right, and I'm wrong. I didn't read the pasuk entirely. You read the pasuk much better than I did. Okay, we'll have to stop here with Vayazeh Shalom Ashur. We'll try to have a shir next week, Monday night, one more time before Shavuos. Hopefully on Shavuos we will also be able to have a shir. We'll see how things go. And we should say some shalom to Ira. It's going to Eretz Yisrael tomorrow night. And good things for everybody. We got to run into Mincha, which is in 2 minutes and 32 seconds. Okay.